All right, what's up, everyone? It's Zach, and today I'm here with a very special guest. I'm here with Dan Harazin. Dan, how are you?
I'm doing better than I deserve, sir. How are you today?
Glad to hear it. I would say the same. I would definitely say the same. So, good to be here and good to catch up with you. So, thank you for taking the time to join the podcast.
It is my pleasure. I gotta say, you've had some great people on here, the Mark Hansons and Jake Amons
Yeah,
of the world, just high performers and just genuinely good people. So it's an honor to be on.
yeah, and it's an honor to have you and to include you in that list of great people. So, it's going to be a great conversation. To those of you listening back home, Dan is someone that I've had the privilege and pleasure of knowing for quite a while. We go back to CMU, so Dan's a fellow Chippewa Fire Up Chips. Fun fact, he was actually my RA for I don't know, a year or a couple of years or something. But that we go back to CMU, and since then, Dan's found himself kind of like in the business world and in the Air National Guard, and now he works through for them as well. So really cool. Interesting journey and a lot of interest in things like myself. So passion in sports and being active and things like that. So I'm excited to dive into different passions and topics with you.
Yes, sir. I'm looking forward to it as
Yeah,
well.
awesome. So I know I kind of just gave a quick little overview of yourself, Dan, but do you mind going in depth a little bit about your background, who you are, what you're doing, all that good stuff?
Yeah, not at all. So I am a Catholic husband and father. I refer to myself as a Christ admirer. That's where I'm at in my faith journey.
Yeah,
I enjoy pretty much everything fitness related, just being outside, moving my body. Like you said, I'm an airman in the Michigan Air National Guard, proud CMU alum, fire up chips. Um, I'm from Michigan, born and raised here. I love it, southwest part of the state. I know you kind of alluded to the sports, but me growing up, sports was, gosh, as far back as I can remember. My both my parents are from Chicago. My dad actually played football for Notre Dame back in the '80s under Lou Holtz. So
okay.
some of my earliest memories are playing Notre Dame in the basement with my brothers, just tackling each other into the couch or the concrete sometimes. Yeah, played a lot of sports growing up. Had the privilege of meeting a lot of great people through that, and um, in a way, it kind of led me to CMU. Got to meet even more people, met my eventual wife, and here we are.
Yeah. So you mentioned that sports kind of led you to CMU. How did it lead you to CMU?
Yeah, so when I was growing up, I lived in one town, and I actually ended up switching schools. Looking back, I mean, the reason I did it is because I wanted to play football for a little bit of a bigger program.
Okay.
Um, and I'd never played football before, so I was kind of taking a shot in the dark.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And so I switched schools. Did not go well my first year, and then I had luckily had some coaches that kind of not only worked on me as a football player, but worked with me as a person,
Hmm.
kind of developing some discipline, the work ethic, um, and I turned out to have a pretty successful high school career. I played football was my main sport and ran track,
Hmm.
so I had a great time with that. Had a lot of success with my teammates. I didn't play in college, but when I
Right.
look back at my sports journey, I say that it led me to CMU because the person I was and the trajectory I was on before I got really serious about my athletic pursuits, that wouldn't wouldn't have gotten me into the program that I got into at CMU.
Okay.
Um, Testament to the time and effort that people put into me.
Yeah.
Um, but that was a big part of me kind of going on that journey, getting into the program at CMU, and being able to get through the coursework there was what I learned on a sports field years before I ever even knew what Central Michigan was.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that I love sports too, and I grew up playing sports and everything. And I don't know, sometimes, I get people say like, oh, it's just a sport, like, it's just a game, and it totally is, right? And even if you play college or professionally, like you're really fortunate to just like play a game and have a career out of it, make a living out of it, whatever the case may be. But I really truly think that getting involved with sports, you can learn so many life lessons or so many lessons that like translate to so many different aspects of our just experiences throughout life.
No, I definitely agree.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing for me too, um, you and I, it's fitness now because there's less organized sport
Right.
opportunities. When you're out in the real world, moving your body and with other people, it's a sometimes cruel teacher, but
Yeah.
it's a very effective teacher, and you learn a lot and you get to apply in the real world what you learn
Right.
versus just kind of getting told and mentally thinking about
Hmm.
it. It sticks, it kind of becomes part of your psyche at that point.
Yeah. I like how you brought up the mental aspect of it just there because I think that like a lot of sports and training for sports and practicing, it's a mental game. And I think that like if you can kind of learn that, it can really help in it with your job or just like with relationships or whatever, just like having that like mental kind of discipline and just like being able to tell yourself that like especially with like I don't know, I think about running for example. Like I think sometimes it can be like, oh, running 10 miles is so far, but it's like mentally like, you can do it. It's more of a mental game than a physical game sometimes.
Well, I definitely agree with that. Um, I'm sure you can think of specific instances where you were able to transfer what you learned on a
Hmm.
sports field. Honestly, for me, like I said, I'm in the Air National Guard.
Yeah.
So a couple years ago, I was at Lackland Air Force Base for basic military training. I look back at that, as a whole, basic training was one of the more difficult things I've done.
Sure.
But I look at any given day of basic training versus any given day of our 4-a-day football practices in the middle of August.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? Those are honestly tougher.
Yeah.
And our coaches honestly be dogging us. And it definitely helped me. And you could tell with basic training, you could tell who had played sports, who'd been yelled at before, who could kind of
Sure.
take a little bit of heat. And then there was other people this was their first time getting yelled at. You could see
Right.
it because they clam up, they'd freeze, they get nervous.
Right.
Um, and so it kind of in a way it kind of felt like I was going back to a fun time in my life playing sports
Yeah.
when I was at basic. So that got me through some long days there down in Texas.
Yeah. No, I could imagine. And it's interesting that you brought that up because like based on what I know of you and like your athletic background, in sports and working out, fitness, just being active and stuff, like when when I heard that you were serving, like I wasn't surprised. Like it made sense. And I was like, oh, I could see you doing that. But like I didn't know that was something that you ever had interest in. So like were you always interested and kind of keeping it in the back of the mind, or how did it come about for you to actually join up?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I suppose the short version would be so I graduated from Central Michigan in 19. And I was
Yeah.
working in sports. I was working in minor league
Right.
baseball. Really fun job, but really bad time to be working in minor league baseball because obviously a year later, pandemic comes around,
Mm-hmm.
I get laid off.
Mm.
I was on unemployment for a while, just kind of hanging out. My older brother, he's actually in the Army National Guard.
Okay.
He'd kind of been prodding at me to look into it for a while, and he caught me at a good time. He lives in Florida, but he came up to visit for a wedding. He said, "Hey, you got to check it out. Whether it's the Army, Air Force, whatever, like
Mm-hmm.
they can really there's some good perks." So I did, got in touch with a recruiter, and then off I went on that journey. But I think leading up to that, there was a bit more of a lead up. I mean, I've got in my family history going all the way back to the Civil War, Battle of Shiloh. I had ancestors, I guess you could say at this point,
Yeah.
out of Illinois who fought, they died in that battle. I had two great uncles that died in World War II.
Mm.
My grandfather served during Vietnam. It's so I suppose when I looked at it, I'm like, yeah, it is sort of a family legacy.
Yeah.
And I will say there was a lot of like practical reasons I joined. There's education benefits, the pay,
Mm-hmm.
but there is not to sound all gung ho and patriotic, but there is that bit of I want to serve my country and
Sure.
kind of carry on that family legacy.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's great that you've been able to kind of carry on that legacy. And yeah, I mean, of course, like you said, like there's that kind of, you know, that aspect of it, but then also practical benefits to doing it as well. So it's nice that you were able to do both and like found genuine pleasure and satisfaction doing it for both reasons. It wasn't just like I did it for only one reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's
Yeah.
always nice when you can kind of join those two
Yes.
together because so often it's either I really enjoy this, but it's not like I can make a living out of it,
Right.
or it's just kind of some trivial thing versus, yeah, this is important. This is how I pay the bills, but
Hmm.
it's a drain and it's terrible.
Yeah.
So to be able to kind of combine the two, it's good.
Yeah. Definitely. And now where you're at right now, like, are you and I apologize if I'm saying any terms or anything, but like, are you active duty with it, or are you just like working for the National Guard but not like serving, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting way it's set up with the guard.
Yeah.
So technically, I am active duty at the
Hmm.
moment. I'm a guard member, but I'm activated. So, I go to work every day,
Hmm.
put on the OCP uniform. Um, it's in a lot of ways, it's kind of like your typical office job. What I do, I don't fly any planes. I kind of wish I did. It'd be a lot of fun, but I'm a little too tall and my
Yeah.
eyes are a little too bad for that.
Okay.
But yeah, it's essentially an office job, but put on the uniform every day and
Okay.
do your thing.
Gotcha. Okay. That's awesome. Yeah. And I know you talked a little bit about basic and your experiences with that. And I guess the question that came to mind is like, is there anything that you learned about yourself when you're going through basic training that like you didn't already know or that like your athletic background didn't prepare you for?
Yeah, that's another really good question. So the thing about Air Force basic training, I don't, it's tough. I don't want to oversell it because
Hmm.
when a lot of people think basic training, they think Full Metal Jacket,
Yeah.
all those other war movies you see, and then
Right.
Marine Corps, Army. There's no movies about Air Force basic training.
Hmm.
Um, it's a lot more mental, is what I've heard. I
Okay.
actually know a couple people who've gone through both. But it's a lot. We didn't. You're not like running around in the woods with an 80-pound rucksack, and you're not crawling through the mud. It's a lot more. You're focusing on your attention to detail. So
Mm.
you fold a lot of clothes, and you get yelled at a lot for not folding your clothes right, and you march around a lot. You get yelled at for not marching. Um, so it wasn't so much the physical aspect of it. I had that down,
Yeah.
but the mental aspect was tough. And I sometimes I'll say the best part of basic training was, I was in a flight of 50 people.
Hmm.
So I got to spend time with 49 other guys that I did not know before I got there, obviously. And that was also the worst part of basic training because you get on each other's nerves
Yeah.
because you are literally there's no privacy for 8 weeks. But if I learned anything, I was a lot braver than I thought I could be because
Okay.
there's a lot of times where you have to kind of stick your neck out
Hmm.
for your wingman, as we call it. They want to teach you accountability and they want to teach you not to shirk the blame.
Hmm.
Um, and that was something that I kind of knew conceptually, Jocko Willink, extreme ownership, stuff
Hmm.
along those lines. But again, to apply it, like I was fortunate enough, I got put in a leadership position. They call it the dorm chief, so maybe unfortunate enough, but you're essentially the head guy,
Okay.
and the instructor goes through you to disseminate information to everyone, and then when something gets messed up, which it inevitably will,
Hmm.
um, you get in trouble for it, even if you didn't do
Gotcha.
it. So there was a lot of times I was getting in trouble for things I didn't really have control over,
Yeah.
but it was you were expected to kind of step up and lead even when instructions were ambiguous.
Gotcha.
I'd say one kind of practical to kind of distill it down.
Okay.
Going into it, I always thought like I was not feeling very brave, not feeling very courageous going into it. It's like, well, once I get used to it, like
Hmm.
once I get like a week in and I know the program, I'll be ready to get after it.
Yeah.
I quickly learned, and so in my mind it was I need to develop the competence, and then I'll have the courage
Hmm.
to step up and be a leader. And I quickly learned that yeah, it's the inverse. You have
Hmm.
to have the courage to step up, and to do whatever the task is at hand.
Yeah.
And that's how you gain competence.
Okay.
And that was when I felt like I saw that when I thought of those two words and put the dots together. Because I'd seen it before in my life
Sure.
with sports, with school. But in that moment, I was like, okay, I can't sit around and wait to to kind of build up these skills, then to get to get courageous.
Right.
You just got to kind of step out and do it.
Yeah.
It's a training environment. It was a safe environment to do so.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what stuck with me, and that's been invaluable.
Okay.
You know, in a relationship with my wife,
Yeah.
being a father, it's been a game changer.
I love it. That's awesome. And so you said, what was it? Was it dorm chief? You said it was called
Yes, yeah, dorm chief.
dorm
So they
chief.
don't call them barracks in the Air Force. Yeah, your dorm.
Okay.
So I was the head honcho.
So I don't know, man. Like to me, that sounds like you're just being an RA all over again.
In a way, and I kind of thought about that while I was there. I used a lot of what I learned as an RA
Yeah.
in those types of training because um, a lot of it was you had to be there for your wingmen because some of these guys had never left home before.
Right.
I was 24 at the time. Some of these guys were 17, 18 years old. They'd
Mm.
never left home. They'd never had a job.
Yeah.
Never really had anyone to hold them accountable. And, obviously mental health it's a delicate balance to strike because you're trying to push people and you're trying to put them under pressure.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you don't want to push it too far.
Right.
And we had some guys who kind of were on the verge of breaking down, and then some people had to step in and have conversations. And in those, when I was having conversations with people, I was thinking back to Lars Lear Hall.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm thinking back to RA training. Like, you're in this military environment, you're supposed to be kind of tough and macho, but you got to be able to kind of pivot
Right.
and say, all right, tell me what's wrong. Like talk to me. You got to be really sensitive. So um, that was that was nice to kind of fall back on that.
Yeah. No, that's funny. And yeah, like I said in the introduction, to everyone listening, yeah, Dan was my RA at Larzy. So yeah, it's just funny to think about. And maybe I'm biased or whatever, but I would say that from my experiences, you did a good job there back in undergrad. Commanding the floor and making sure everyone was doing well. So I'm sure that those skills translated well for you when you were the dorm chief in basic.
Oh, I appreciate
Yeah.
that. That's a very kind thing for you to say. And I will say there was four other like student leaders
Okay.
with the flight that helped. And even being an RA, having experienced residents like yourself to kind of help and
Yeah.
lead the charge there,
Exactly.
make the job a lot easier. So I appreciate, the way you were as a resident as well.
Yeah. Of course, man. So we're kind of pivoting gears a bit, and now I'm genuinely curious because I don't know if I know the origin of this, but you have family ties to Chicago, but you're a Packers fan.
Oh gosh, I had a feeling this would come up.
I don't know if I know the story
Yeah,
or what the reasoning behind it is.
yeah, that's a question my family asks me all the time. So I guess I'll go quickly through this.
Yeah.
But yeah, my whole family line is Chicago. We did the little ancestry.com
Okay.
DNA testing.
Yeah.
It's so much. It's all Chicago, all Chicago. Um, so yeah, my parents are big Bears fans,
Mm-hmm.
Cubs fans. I just remember as a kid, like I said, football was our thing. So football was always on.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was always watching. And I remember it very vividly. It was like 2000. I was 5 years old, so it was 2002,
Mm-hmm.
and the Packers were on. It was a Monday night or a Sunday night, probably Monday night. And I just remember looking at him. It was Brett Favre. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I like that team. I didn't know what it was, the colors maybe, or the logo's just the G.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, I like that team, and it stuck. And I've been a huge Packers fan since. And honestly, I'm a Chicago White Sox fan, which is miserable.
Yeah.
But that's my only Chicago team.
Okay.
The part of Michigan I live in, it's kind of like the battle line between Detroit and Chicago sports.
Yeah.
So there's almost as many Bears fans here as
Really?
there are Lions fans.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, but growing up, we got the Chicago newspaper,
Mm-hmm.
so they were always, ragging on the Packers, and maybe that just made me like them more
Okay.
because I felt like emboldened by the Chicago press
Yeah.
complaining about Brett Favre and then Aaron Rodgers. So
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, being a Packers fan right now is better than being a Bears fan because that's tough right now with how they're playing. But I will say, and we talked about it offline earlier, but being a Lions fan is a fun time. So I am glad that it's finally an exciting time to be a Lions fan for me at least.
dude, I'm happy for you guys. And like, as
Appreciate
long
it.
as it's not the Bears
Yeah.
and especially not the Vikings,
Yeah. Ooh.
I'll take it.
Okay.
Whatever.
Perfect. So what's your what's your take on the Packers now that the era or the Rodgers era is over? Are you a Jordan Love believer, or are they a few years out from being competitive, or what are your thoughts on the team?
I do believe in love.
Okay.
They're a young team,
Mm-hmm.
but I like what I've seen so far. They've got a lot of fight.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, another great thing. Even when you're watching sports, you could take that. Like, you look at the Packers, they got a lot of talent, but they're really young.
Mm-hmm.
I can kind of relate that to my, maybe not so much the talent part, but the young part, the inexperienced part. Like, you watch them, they go out there, they play hard,
Mm-hmm.
they kind of take the good with the bad. And that's something, anybody can learn from.
Yeah.
But purely sports related, I think obviously this isn't going to be their year,
Mm-hmm.
but who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe 2 or 3 years down the road.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I could see that. I mean, obviously I'm a Lions fan, but when the Packers, when the Bears, when they're both doing well, like it's just more fun. Being a football fan is just more fun when the teams are the whole division is playing well. So I do hope that the Packers do well. And it's funny because I don't know if this was just like something to do with the around the time that we grew up and stuff, but I specifically remember liking the Packers like in the early 2000s, and maybe it was Brett Favre, but I actually have like this very random Green Bay Packers lamp that I like saw at a store when I was like 7 or something. I was like, oh, I need that. That's so cool. So I did have a Packers phase, but um, I'm Lions
There
through
you
and through.
go.
But there's something about the Packers. I don't know. It's just like a historic franchise. Brett Favre was great during our childhoods and stuff, and just a classic. Lambeau's just classic.
Yeah, I've never gotten to attend
Okay.
or attend a game there, but definitely love to. I feel like a bad Packers fan.
Yeah, you gotta do
I
it.
said I say that all the time with my faith. I'm like, oh, I feel like a bad Catholic because I haven't done this or that.
Sure.
I feel like a bad Packers fan too. I've never been to Lambeau. It's like a pilgrimage
Right,
almost for
right. You'll have to do it
fans.
sometime. So, on the topic of football, something I'm kind of curious on is, you obviously played football, like we've talked about a little bit, and I've never played football organized. I played just for fun with friends and at school for recess and stuff, but I've never played organized football. But a lot of folks that I know that have played football, whether it's just in high school, maybe collegiately, even professionally, like a lot of people have said just like the game has just changed so much from maybe when we were growing up, in the 90s, 2000s, whatever it might be, to the game that we have now, just like in terms of how it's played, the speed of it, or even, I've seen a lot of criticism about like just how you can't even like tackle or hit, the same way that you could a decade ago. So, do you have any general thoughts about like the game or how it's changed from maybe when you played or when you were watching it growing up to the game that we see nowadays?
Yeah, definitely. Um, I think for the most part, the changes, it obviously is a very different game.
Yeah.
You know, things change. That's the sign that something is alive. Like if the game of football hadn't changed, then
Hmm.
it's probably dying out at that point. But I think they're good for the most part. And then if we're talking about like the safety,
Yeah.
um, and the rule changes, and I say that because in my experience, I was very fortunate. I got out pretty unscathed health wise. Can't say the same for, some of my good
Sure.
friends. Messed up shoulders, messed up knees, backs.
Hmm.
Some, concussions are obviously a huge, huge thing. I got a friend who messed up his head pretty bad, and he still is kind of dealing with some of the side effects from that
Yeah.
10, 11 years later.
Yeah.
So I think the rule changes there are good.
Yeah.
And it's interesting now being a father. I have a girl. She just turned 1, so
Hmm.
she probably won't play like organized high school football, maybe.
Right.
But that's something my wife and I have talked about, and we're not convinced we really want our kids to play
Hmm.
football, which it's kind of weird to hear myself say it because it was such an important part of my my upbringing and my
Yeah.
development. And I love the game, but it is
Yeah.
dangerous. And yeah, I look back and I never had a concussion per se, but I can think of a few very specific hits where I'm like, yeah, I probably if I ever got one, it was probably there.
Yeah.
And it's you kind of wonder, when I'm up at night, trying to fall asleep, sometimes your mind wanders like, you see all the stuff about CTE and all the,
Hmm.
the brain injuries. It's like, what's it going to be like 20, 30 years from now?
Yeah.
So I personally, I love a good football game. I love a big hit,
Hmm.
but I think trying to rein it in and make it safer for the players is a good thing
Yeah.
because it is a beautiful game
Yeah.
and you learn a lot from it. Um, but there are some negative side
Sure.
effects to it.
Sure. Yeah, no, I appreciate your perspective, and I agree. I mean, again, I've never played, so I can't have super strong personal opinions, but it's a great game, it's a great sport, but it can be dangerous and really jeopardize people's health. So I do think that, I like you said, I'm all for a big hit and everything, but I think that the rules and how the game has changed has made it safer for folks, and I think that that's the important thing. Um, Something that like kind of you brought up there is being a father and a husband, and congratulations on both those fronts. I'm just curious, like how's that been for you? How has it, like, what are the big life lessons you've learned, or did you feel prepared for it, or are you still kind of like learning every day as you go through the journey?
Yeah, so I would say, being a husband, being a father, it's it's amazing,
Yeah.
and there was a time in my life where I always knew I wanted to be a dad
Hmm.
and I wanted to get married. I suppose I've always had kind of a more, I guess, traditional mindset, if you
Hmm.
want to put it that way, about that. Um, one one thing I've been surprised by is I never spent a lot of time around babies and like really little
Hmm.
kids. So I had to learn how to change a diaper and do the bottle and burp and all that.
Yeah.
But and my wife, Ellie, she did a fantastic job of teaching me all those things. She's a very maternal person.
Yeah.
So she gave me a lot of confidence with that. But kind of right off the bat, I felt a lot more confident in a way than I thought it would. Like I'm like, it's different when it's your own child,
Right.
and that might be an evolutionary thing. Like I remember when they first held her up after she was born. Well, first I thought she looked like my niece, but I was like, that's she looked a lot like me, and I was like, oh, that's my baby, and it's almost like you don't even consciously do it, but you just feel and think so differently with
Yeah.
that child, and it's so easy and just comes so naturally to love her. Her name's Cecilia.
Yeah.
She's great. Um, it's so easy just to be affectionate with her and to love her. Um, and obviously having the support of a good spouse
Yeah.
goes a long way with that. So it has its challenges, like I said.
Hmm.
I will say one and another big thing I've drawn from it. I've really it's really prompted me to focus on my faith more
Yeah.
and to kind of rely more on that higher power
Hmm.
that I believe in, to rely on God. Because as great as it makes you feel being a husband and a father, um, it also shows a lot of where you fall short
Hmm.
and a lot how you have a lot of stuff to work on, and how I can't really do it on my own. I need my family, and I need my faith
Yeah.
to hold me accountable and kind of push me further.
Definitely. Well, first, I just want to take a quick second to say shout out to Ellie, because she's always been fantastic, and to anyone listening, I knew her as well from school. So fantastic person, and just super happy for the two of you. But shout out to her. Um, but yeah, Dan, you mentioned kind of in what you just shared, the support of your family and the support of your faith. So those are two things that I'd love to chat with you on. So I'll just start with the family piece of it. something that I'm curious is like, I know, your daughter's still very young, so maybe this might not be something you've experienced or seen yet or had a chance to have like a realization of, but now that you're a parent yourself and a father, do you see any of the things that like you're doing for her or with her kind of like are you seeing like signs of like your parents in your own parenting style and how you are now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. It kind of reminds me, I forget what company it is, but they do those commercials where like, you're a homeowner and you're becoming your
Yeah.
parents. Um, but I have seen that coming through.
Okay.
Um, specific, obviously my dad,
Yeah.
'cause, I'm a dad and that makes sense,
Right.
but my dad's he's been kind of like a very serious person, but he's always very affectionate with us as children.
Okay.
He was always very goofy. And that's something again, I don't really think about it, but when I'm with her, I'm just always like making really weird voices and trying to make her laugh and
Yeah.
doing all this stuff and like going around the side of the door and hiding and peeking my head out. And like and Ellie pointed it out too. She's like, that's literally what your dad does. Yeah, I guess I learned from the best.
Yeah, there you go.
My dad's definitely he's one of my heroes. I'm like, I could do a lot worse
Yeah.
if I end up being like him.
That's awesome. And like with that kind of example and everything, it sounds like it's almost like you're taking things from your dad or like you're doing things that you learned or seen him do that, and like you don't even necessarily realize it all the time, right?
No, no, not at
Yeah.
all. And it's so interesting how that stuff can get imprinted on
Mhm.
us, whether it's our friends, coworkers, whatever, but
Sure.
especially our parents, 'cause, they have such a huge influence.
Yeah.
But I'm fortunate to say, obviously nobody's perfect. No one has
Right.
perfect parents, but I'm fortunate to say, both of my parents were, they're both still around,
Yeah.
thanks be to God, and um, great, just continue to be a great influence.
Mhm.
Feel very fortunate that Cece and my in-laws as well, Ellie's parents, they're still around, and it's great to be able to have the whole family,
Yeah.
together and there to support her. Because it really changed when you have a kid. It's like I want to give her the world.
Yeah.
I want to do everything I can to um, give her the best.
Yeah.
I want to give her the best of me. So
I love that, man. That makes my heart really happy. And again, I have always had great interactions with you, and I've been fortunate to call you a friend throughout the years. And you're genuinely a really good person, and I think that you're going to continue to do amazing things just in this world in general, but also as a husband and as a father. So I'm just happy for you all.
oh, that is very kind,
Yeah,
sir.
of course.
That means a lot. Again, coming from you, because we've been fortunate to have pretty in-depth
Yeah,
conversations over the years, and I can definitely say the same for
I
you.
appreciate that.
Um, I know you've definitely impacted me on my journey. So no, I appreciate that a
Yeah,
lot. Thank you.
of course, and it's an honor, and I appreciate your words as well, and kind of switching gears to the other side of that equation of where you get support and everything. You mentioned your faith, and I think that from knowing you in college, I want to say that I knew that faith was in your life, but I don't think I knew maybe how important it is, or maybe it wasn't a huge part of your life then and it is now. But I was wondering, could you kind of walk me through your faith journey a bit?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a cradle Catholic. So I was baptized about a month after I was born,
Okay.
back in late 90s.
Yeah.
And I've gone to church my whole life,
Yeah.
and went to catechism class, received all my sacraments, and for a long time, like I prayed, I believed in God, and I'd go to church just because it was the thing you do.
Hmm.
It didn't really have any practical impact on how I lived my
Hmm.
life. In college, I kind of started making it more my own.
Okay.
And it was actually my last semester of college. I studied abroad in Mexico because
Right.
I was doing a Spanish major. And it was there, kind of oddly enough, I stayed with the family I stayed with. They were Christians. They weren't Catholic, but they were a Protestant denomination
Hmm.
of Christianity. Awesome. I got so lucky with the family I was with. They were so kind. the minute I got there, they said, don't view yourself as a guest. You're part of the family. Like you don't need to ask to get food out of the fridge. You don't need to ask to do this, that, or the other. So a great family.
Hmm.
Um, and I honestly I credit them with helping me grow more in my faith because they had questions about Catholicism. Because there's a lot of different Protestant beliefs out there, um, but they had they'd ask me questions about why I believed what I believed, and admittedly, I didn't know because I never never thought about the questions they were asking. And I said, well, I'll research that and I'll get back to you. It was a great opportunity to practice my Spanish too.
Yeah.
But through their questions, it kind of opened up an intellectual door to me into the church, into the faith, and it started just making sense to me. And I was like, wow, there's so much to learn,
Hmm.
and I've only scratched the surface, that's for sure.
Right.
But yeah, I really I credit them with kind of opening that up to me. And then I got back from Mexico, and it was applying what I'd learned and kind of that interior shift that I had, and putting it into my life back home. And in my intro, I said I'm a Christ admirer
Yeah.
at this point. I'm kind of stealing. There's a really good movie came out in 2019. It's directed by Terrence Malick. It's called A Hidden Life.
Okay.
It's about a he's not a saint yet. He's on the way to become a canonized saint in the Catholic Church.
Okay.
But his name was Franz Jagerstetter.
Okay.
He was a conscientious objector in World War II. He lived in Austria, and he refused to swear an oath to Hitler.
Mm.
Um, and I'll leave it at that. But it's a beautiful, beautiful movie. Definitely recommend listeners or yourself give it a watch. It's kind of a slow burn. It's very artistic.
Okay.
A lot of scenes of farming in the Austrian countryside.
Okay.
But there's one scene that really it changed my life in a way.
Okay.
There's a scene where he's talking with this guy who's painting the church, and he's painting the apostles, and he's painting Jesus and the Virgin Mary.
Hmm.
Um, and he talks about how what he's painting, it doesn't create followers of Jesus, it just creates admirers of Jesus. And he
Hmm.
says, I help people sit in those pews, I help them look up and dream, and to think that if they lived back in Jesus's time,
Hmm.
they wouldn't have done what everybody else did. They would have stood by him, they would have stood by their faith. He said in reality they would have been in that mob
Hmm.
that killed Jesus, that had him crucified.
Hmm.
um, and he talks about how following Jesus, whatever your faith might be, really adhering to, and even if it's not religious faith, if it's a higher cause, if it's a social justice cause you feel about, really following it and giving yourself to it, it puts a lot of demands on you.
Hmm.
It requires a lot, and it's hard.
Right.
And I think for me, when that struck me, because I said, maybe I'm not at the point where I'm really following Jesus like I should. I admire Jesus a lot. I admire his church. I admire the Catholic Church,
Hmm.
but it was kind of a challenge to me to dive more in depth to it, which I've been doing.
Yeah.
And but I think about that movie a lot. I think about that scene a lot,
Hmm.
and how it kind of impacted me on my journey.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate you sharing that. I think it's really interesting to hear people's individual journeys through their faith because I think there might be some overlap, but I think everyone has a unique journey, and I think the overlap that I might be referring to is I think a lot of folks have that experience where it's kind of like you kind of believe or have or you have your faith because it's what you grew up doing or what your family did or what just felt like the right or normal thing to do, but then you go through that time where like you really try to make it your own because I think you have to at the end of the day like make it your own, and it sounds like that was kind of the experience, and it is really kind of set you on this path that you're on now.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And whether it's faith or any other aspect of life,
Right.
like, you gotta make it your own.
Hmm.
And you gotta make decisions,
Yeah.
and those some decisions are better than others and
Right.
some are easier than others. But that's part of life
Yeah.
is kind of making those choices and kind of setting your own path.
Yeah, definitely. So, question that I have for you is, I know that, just talking to people, I mean, on this podcast, but also just off the podcast, just in personal conversations, when it comes to faith, I know sometimes people, and I've even been in this boat myself, from time to time, it's like, I want to be more involved with my faith, or I want to better commit or practice it, but like, where do I even start, or how do I even begin? Or, I don't know anything about religion or faith, and I want to learn. Like, do you have any advice or tips to folks who might want to kind of dive into that relationship, but kind of aren't sure where to start?
Yes, of course. So I'll preface this by saying, so I'll give my advice, and
Mhm.
I'm going to talk about it from my perspective
Yeah.
as a Catholic, and I know the listeners are able to, apply that to their own situation
Hmm.
if it's a different Christian denomination or a different faith.
Yeah,
I know they can apply it to
for
themselves.
sure.
But also for me, I mean, I was a starving man. I still am a starving man in a way, and
Hmm.
I found bread, I found food in my faith, and I love showing other people where I found it,
Hmm.
where I found that fulfillment and that happiness. Um, but for me, if someone came up to me and asked like, "Hey, I want to learn more about faith," my approach to it would be, what's something that you could do, that you would do, that would get you to your goal? And if your goal is to learn more about God, learn more about Catholicism or Christianity or whatever,
Hmm.
something you would do or something you could do that you would do. So my first piece of advice would be to hop on YouTube or hop on Google
Hmm.
and think there's got to be one question. There's probably multiple, but think of that one question that is just kind of getting in your way. That's like just really a thorn in your side
Hmm.
that's kind of keeping you from exploring deeper.
Yeah.
And I'd look it up on YouTube and I'd find the most popular video and I'd watch it. So it could be, how could God exist if bad things happen in the world?
Hmm.
Like, does he not, does God care about me?
Right.
You could Google that, watch that first video, and even if what the person says, even if you don't agree with it, or you're like, I don't really know, just give it a chance.
Hmm.
So I think what that does is it's accessible.
Yeah.
Anyone, we spend a lot of time on our phones. You can watch a YouTube video.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it goes to show that your doubt doesn't disqualify you from believing in God.
Hmm.
It's not an unreasonable thing. A lot of smart people have thought what you're thinking over the years. And at the same time, a lot of smart, well-intended people have thought of a response to it and, have an answer. So I think it kind of grounds what you're thinking and kind of brings it into reality and says, okay, I'm not an outlier here. Like,
Hmm.
people have thought of this before and there are resources. My second piece of advice after that would be to talk to somebody who has a faith life that you admire, or that has some traits that you want to duplicate in your life.
Yeah.
Because that way it can be personalized. They can share their doubts, they can share their successes,
Hmm.
and stuff like that. After that, if that conversation goes well, then I would recommend praying. I know a lot of people will start with prayer first, or reading scripture
Hmm.
first. Those are great things. I'd never tell anyone not to do those things.
Right.
But it can be intimidating.
Oh yeah,
Like you said,
definitely.
yeah, it can be intimidating. You might not know what to say, and you might feel a little silly, like, I don't know if God's out there. Am I just sitting in my room talking to myself?
Right.
But and that's all right. Those are the kind of questions you have to ask. But I would say pray.
Yeah.
And that can either be extemporaneous, which is the fancy word for just kind of from the heart.
Hmm.
Just tell God what's on your mind. Tell him what you're thankful for, what you're upset about,
Hmm.
whatever. Or it could be a more formal prayer. So
Yeah.
it could be like Our Father, or for Catholics, you pray the Hail Mary, pray the Rosary,
Hmm.
either of those things. And I would say don't worry about looking foolish. You can do this in the privacy of your home. You can you can do it in your mind. You don't even need to physically say anything.
Right.
And the worst thing that'll happen is what you look kind of silly, but we all do silly
Yeah.
things. Like I said earlier, if someone took a video of me playing with my daughter and all the voices I do and put it on the internet, that I'd look like a fool in
Yeah.
a lot of
Sure.
ways. But yeah, so I'd say that,
Okay.
look up answers to the questions you have,
Yeah.
talk to somebody you know and trust, and then take the time to actually pray. And if you're doubting, or even if you say, God, I want to believe in you, but I'm struggling,
Hmm.
tell him that. He wants to hear it.
Yeah.
So that'd be my advice.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that. I think that's great advice. And I think, like we've both talked about it, getting into faith or in prayer itself can be intimidating. So I think that this is some really good advice to kind of just start getting the ball rolling or to kind of ease into things. So I appreciate you sharing that and giving some good advice. Awesome. So, Dan, kind of just as we wrap things up a bit and kind of coming to an end of our conversation, I know you're kind of off the grid, social media wise and everything. But to anyone that's like listening and maybe they want to connect with you or just get to learn a little bit more about your story and your journey, is there any good places where folks could connect with you?
Yeah, for sure. So all I have in terms of social media, I have a LinkedIn account.
Okay.
So if you look me up there, you'll see me
Okay.
in my Air Force dress uniform.
Perfect.
But yeah, feel free to connect with me on there,
Okay.
whether you want to talk about sports or the military,
Yeah.
or if you need that person to talk about faith with,
Yeah.
I'd love to do that for you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I will put Dan's LinkedIn in the description of the episode, so you can go down there and check it out and connect with him, and have some good conversation. Again, Dan's a great guy, and really fun to talk about. Again, whether it's for fun with sports or maybe it's about the military or faith or anything. I know he's always willing to connect and chat, so definitely connect with him there if you found this conversation interesting. And before we officially call it an end, I have two more things. So one thing that I always ask at the end of podcasts is, you know, to everyone listening, what's like a final message that you want to leave to the listeners?
Yeah, if I had a final message, and I suppose I'll split it into two.
Okay.
Um, I'll go back and reiterate
Yeah.
that big lesson I learned at basic training. That if there's something in your life that you need to confront, or a challenge facing you, really really think about that I suppose that assertion
Hmm.
that courage precedes competence, and that if you try and wait around to be good at something in order to get the courage to do it, you could be looking at it backwards. So the courage is going to precede the competence in whatever it might be that you're trying to achieve. And then the second thing would be, for those of you who are on the faith journey, looking to start it, or are far, far ahead of where I am. One of the quotes that really sticks with me in terms of my faith in God comes from Saint Irenaeus. He lived way back in the second century.
Hmm.
He said, "The glory of God is a human being fully alive." So if that's something you are interested in, I just want you to know that God wants you to be happy
Hmm.
more than you do, and He loves you more than you could ever imagine.
That's really powerful. I haven't heard that, but that's very powerful and really hits home. So thank you for doing that. Awesome. Well, Dan, thank you for kind of giving that final message to the listeners of both being courageous and also just for folks on their faith journey. And the last thing that I wanted to end with, this is something I've never done before. I actually haven't even thought of this idea until we're in this moment right now. So again, to anyone listening, that's how unscripted and unprepared these podcasts actually are. But you're a new father, and you have your daughter, Cece, and you said she just turned 1 and everything, so very young. And the cool thing about podcasts are that once this comes out there, it's going to be out there. It's going to be on all the podcast platforms, Spotify, YouTube, Apple, whatever, for forever, essentially, unless I ever take it down, which I don't have any intentions unless someone ever requests that like their episode gets taken down. So if I can put you on the spot, the last thing that I want to end with is someday, maybe 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now, this episode will still be around and maybe CC will be able to listen to it. So is there anything that you want to say now in 2023 that one day she might be able to hear someday from you?
That's a wow, I like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I suppose CC, I love you. You are very loved, and your value and worth it comes from something that no one could ever take away. So don't ever let anyone do that. We'll always be here for you, always be praying for you. And I suppose on a temporary note, I do hope your ears are feeling better. We got tubes put in your ears, and you were not happy with this, but I hope your ears don't hurt you anymore. Love you.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, I think that's cool. I mean, I hope that, you could bookmark or something this episode when it goes live and hopefully someday share that with her because I think that'll be cool. A little time capsule almost. But I appreciate your time and it's always throughout the whole time I've known you. It's been great to connect with you and have conversations, whether they're just the surface level of our sports teams or the more deeper, meaningful conversations that we've had. And certainly this one is one that I'm going to hold close to me and one that I feel like I've grown from and learned a lot from you. And, it truly is an honor to be able to call you a friend and to know you throughout these years. So I appreciate it. You've done tremendous things for your life and for your family. And, I'm super excited for the next phase of the life journey for you. And certainly I'll always be in your corner to support and praying for you and your family's health and happiness and everything. So, keep doing what you're doing and just, if you ever need anything, I'm always here for you. But it's been a pleasure having you on, and I'm happy we could share this conversation with all the listeners.
Likewise, Zach. I really appreciate it. Again, appreciate that you put the time and effort into these podcasts. I've got a lot out of them. I'm sure other people do as well. So keep up the great work. You're doing a great service to your listeners.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you for being a supporter of the podcast all throughout the years. And anytime you want to come back, you're always more than welcome. But we'll have to keep in touch and catch up more soon. Hopefully see each other in person sometime because we were talking before this. It's been like 5 years or something since we've seen each other. So hopefully we can get a reunion sometime soon too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Awesome. All right, Dan. Well, thanks again. Have a good night and we'll talk soon.
Yes, sir. We'll see you later.
See ya. Bye.